Hello friends, and welcome back to the Whispers of Science, where we drift through the wonders of paleontology, one gentle discovery at a time. Tonight, we're settling into a question that has stirred scientific debate for decades, one that challenges everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. When you look at a sparrow pecking at seeds outside your window, or watch a hawk soaring high above the trees, you might see nothing more than graceful creatures of the sky. But what if I told you that within those delicate bones and feathered wings lies the echo of something far more ancient and powerful? What if those gentle chirps carry whispers from a time when giants ruled the earth? The idea sounds almost impossible, doesn't it? That the tiny hummingbird hovering at your garden feeder shares its bloodline with Tyrannosaurus rex. That the robin building its nest in your backyard carries within its very DNA the genetic memory of creatures that shook the ground with every step. Yet this is precisely what modern science suggests, and it has sparked one of the most fascinating controversies in paleontology. The question isn't just whether birds evolved from dinosaurs, but how this transformation could have happened and why some experts still debate the very foundations of this theory. Tonight, we'll explore this gentle mystery together, wandering through fossil beds and laboratory discoveries, through the minds of scientists who have devoted their lives to understanding this ancient puzzle. We'll visit the moment when the first feathered fossils emerged from stone, challenging decades of scientific certainty. We'll drift through the evidence that connects the mighty velociraptor to the delicate wren, and we'll discover why this connection has remained one of the most beautiful and contentious ideas in all of science. But before we begin this journey through deep time, if you enjoy these quiet explorations into the mysteries of our natural world, a gentle like and subscribe would mean everything. It helps these stories find their way to others who might be searching for wonder in the peaceful hours of their evening. And please let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight and what time it is there. There's something magical about knowing these tales of ancient life are being shared across so many different skies, connecting us all through curiosity and the simple joy of learning. So now, take a deep breath, let your shoulders relax, and together, let's step softly into the world of deep time, where the line between dinosaur and bird begins to blur like watercolors in the rain. The story begins not with a grand revelation, but with a whisper from the stones. In the quiet countryside of Bavaria, Germany, there lies a limestone quarry where time itself seems to have paused. The rock here is so fine, so perfectly preserved, that it captures moments from 150 million years ago with the delicacy of a photograph. It was here, in 1861, that workers splitting stone for roofing tiles discovered something that would forever change our understanding of life on Earth. What they found was a single feather, perfectly preserved in the ancient limestone. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable, just another fossil among countless others. But this feather was different. It was older than any feather had a right to be, dating to a time when the world was ruled by dinosaurs, when flowering plants had not yet bloomed, and when the ancestors of modern mammals scurried like shadows beneath the feet of giants. The feather belonged to a creature they would later name Archaeopteryx, and it would become one of the most important fossils ever discovered. Here was an animal to exist that seemed in the space between worlds, neither fully dinosaur nor fully bird, but something wonderfully in between. Its skeleton showed the reptilian features of its dinosaur heritage, with teeth lining its jaws, claws on its wings, and a long bony tail. Yet covering this ancient frame were feathers, delicate and complex, identical in structure to those of modern birds. For Charles Darwin, whose theory of evolution had been published just 2 years earlier, Archaeopteryx was a gift from the deep past. Here was exactly the kind of transitional form his theory predicted should exist, a bridge between the reptilian and avian worlds. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, as critics of evolution were demanding to see such intermediate fossils. Nature, it seemed, had provided the answer carved in stone. Yet even as Archaeopteryx captured the imagination of scientists and the public alike, questions lingered in the shadows. Was this strange creature truly the ancestor of modern birds, or was it something else entirely? And if birds did indeed descend from dinosaurs, which dinosaurs have given us the ability to rise to creatures capable of flight? The answers would not come easily, and they would challenge some of the most fundamental assumptions about how evolution works. As we drift deeper into this mystery, we find ourselves in the company of scientists who have spent their lives studying these ancient puzzles. Their work takes them to remote fossil sites, where the desert wind carries whispers of prehistoric seas, and to laboratories where powerful microscopes reveal secrets hidden within fossilized bone. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, yet with each new piece, the picture becomes both clearer and more complex. The debate over bird origins is more than just an academic exercise. It touches on fundamental questions about how life changes over time, about the relationship between form and function, and about the very nature of what it means to be alive. When we ask whether birds evolved from dinosaurs, we're really asking how the impossible becomes possible, how creatures bound to the earth could learn to dance with the sky. In the years following the discovery of Archaeopteryx, paleontologists began to notice something remarkable. The more they studied dinosaur fossils, the more bird-like features they found. Hollow bones that reduced weight without sacrificing strength. Hip structures that allowed for upright walking. Even breathing systems that seemed designed for the high energy demands of flight. It was as if nature had been experimenting with avian features long before the first true bird took to the skies. But perhaps the most startling discovery came not from new fossils, but from a closer examination of dinosaurs we thought we already understood. The mighty Tyrannosaurus rex, that icon of prehistoric terror, revealed surprising secrets when scientists looked beyond its fearsome teeth and massive skull. Its arms, often mocked for their seemingly inadequate size, showed bone structures remarkably similar to those of modern birds. Its legs moved with a gait that computer models suggested was more bird-like than lizard-like. Even its skull showed air-filled spaces that echoed the lightweight construction found in today's flying creatures. The evidence began to accumulate like layers of sediment, each new discovery adding weight to the idea that birds and dinosaurs shared a common heritage. Yet for every piece of evidence that seemed to support this connection, questions arose that challenged the simplicity of the story. If birds evolved from dinosaurs, why did they survive the great extinction that claimed their giant relatives? How did creatures adapted for terrestrial life develop the complex mechanisms needed for flight? And perhaps most puzzling of all, how did cold-blooded reptiles give rise to the warm-blooded masters of the sky? These questions led scientists down paths they had never explored before, into the microscopic world of fossilized cells and the chemical signatures left behind by ancient metabolisms. They studied the growth patterns in dinosaur bones, looking for clues about how these creatures lived and died. They examined the delicate structures of fossilized feathers under electron microscopes, revealing details about color and function that had been preserved for millions of years. What they found challenged many assumptions about the ancient world. Some dinosaurs, it appeared, were not the cold-blooded, sluggish creatures of popular imagination, but active, warm-blooded animals with complex social behaviors. They built nests, cared for their young, and may have even sung to attract mates, much like modern birds do today. The line between dinosaur and bird began to blur not just in anatomy, but in behavior and physiology as well. Yet even as the evidence mounted, skeptics remained. Some pointed to gaps in the fossil record, arguing that the transition from dinosaur to bird required intermediate forms that had never been found. Others questioned whether the similarities between birds and dinosaurs might be the result of convergent evolution, where unrelated creatures develop similar features in response to similar environmental pressures. The debate raged in scientific journals and conference halls, with passionate advocates on both sides presenting their evidence and challenging their opponents' interpretations. The controversy was more than just scientific, it was deeply personal. Careers were built on particular interpretations of the fossil record, and reputations rose and fell with each new discovery. Some researchers spent decades defending theories that would later be overturned by a single, remarkable fossil. Others watched as their carefully constructed arguments were dismantled by new techniques that revealed details their predecessors could never have imagined. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this scientific journey was how it revealed the dynamic nature of scientific understanding. Each new discovery didn't just add to our knowledge, it transformed the very questions we were asking. What began as a simple inquiry about bird origins became a complex exploration of evolution, extinction, behavior, and the very meaning of what we call a dinosaur or a bird. As we continue our gentle exploration of this ancient mystery, we find ourselves standing at the intersection of multiple scientific disciplines. Paleontologists work alongside molecular biologists, studying the genetic codes of living birds for clues about their prehistoric past. Physicists contribute their understanding of aerodynamics and biomechanics, helping to explain how flight might have evolved. Even astronomers play a role, as their studies of ancient climates help us understand the environmental pressures that shaped the evolution of early birds. The story of bird evolution is ultimately a story about transformation, about the incredible plasticity of life in the face of changing conditions. It reminds us that the categories we create to organize the natural world are often more fluid than we imagine, and that the boundaries between one type of creature and another may be far less rigid than they appear. As the years passed and found technology advanced, scientists did themselves with tools their predecessors could only dream of. High-resolution CT scanners could peer inside fossilized bones without damaging them, revealing internal structures that had remained hidden for millions of years. Chemical analysis techniques could detect traces of original organic material, preserved against all odds in ancient stone. And perhaps most remarkably, electron microscopes could examine fossilized feathers with such precision that scientists could determine not just their structure, but even their original colors. These new methods began to paint a picture of the prehistoric world that was far more vibrant and complex than anyone had imagined. Dinosaurs, it turned out, were not the drab, uniformly colored creatures depicted in old museum displays. Some sported brilliant reds and iridescent blues, colors that served purposes we can only guess at. Did they use these displays to attract mates, ward off rivals, or communicate across the prehistoric landscape? The fossils whispered hints, but kept their secrets locked in stone. One of the most significant breakthroughs came from an unexpected source. In the remote regions of northeastern China, in a formation known as the Jihou Group, fossil hunters began uncovering specimens that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Here, in rocks laid down during the early Cretaceous period, volcanic ash had buried ecosystem sod entire quickly and completely, that even the most delicate details were preserved. Feathers lay spread as if their owners had died only yesterday. Stomach contents revealed final meals. Even the soft tissues of internal organs left ghostly impressions in the stone. From these remarkable deposits came a parade of creatures that challenged every assumption about the boundary between dinosaurs and birds. There was Sinosauropteryx, a small predatory dinosaur covered in simple hair-like feathers that served not for flight, but for insulation. Caudipteryx sported long feathers on its arms and tail, yet clearly could not fly. Most stunning of all was Microraptor, a four-winged creature that seemed to represent an entirely different approach to aerial locomotion, gliding through the forest canopy on wings attached to both its arms and legs. Each new discovery from China added another brushstroke to the emerging picture, but the image they created was not the simple, linear progression from dinosaur to bird that many had expected. Instead, it revealed a complex family tree with numerous branches, dead ends, and surprising connections. Some dinosaurs had developed feathers but never learned to fly. Others had experimented with flight, but taken evolutionary paths that led nowhere. The story was messier, more complex, and ultimately more beautiful than the neat narratives that textbooks preferred. Yet these discoveries also raised new questions that cut to the heart of scientific classification itself. If some dinosaurs had feathers, and some could fly, and some displayed behaviors identical to modern birds, then what exactly separated a dinosaur from a bird? Was it simply a matter of when they lived, or were there fundamental differences that justified keeping them in separate categories? The answer, as it emerged from laboratories and fossil sites around the world, was both simple and revolutionary. Birds, according to the growing consensus, were not just descended from dinosaurs, they were dinosaurs. The Great Extinction event that ended the Mesozoic era had not eliminated dinosaurs entirely. It had simply reduced their vast diversity to a single surviving lineage that we now call birds. Every sparrow, every eagle, every penguin was, in the most literal sense, a living dinosaur. This realization transformed not just paleontology, but our entire understanding of extinction and survival. The mass extinction that had seemed so complete, so final, was revealed to be more selective than anyone had imagined. While the giant ground-dwelling dinosaurs perished, their smaller, flying relatives found refuge in the skies. The very adaptations that had originally evolved for other purposes, hollow bones for lightness, feathers for insulation, rapid metabolisms for activity, became the keys to survival when the world changed around them. But acceptance of this new understanding was neither immediate nor universal. Scientific revolutions rarely unfold smoothly, and the idea that birds were living dinosaurs challenged decades of established thinking. Textbooks needed rewriting, museum displays required updating, and most challenging of all, scientists had to abandon cherished theories they had spent careers defending. The resistance came from multiple directions. Some paleontologists pointed to timing issues in the fossil record, noting that some bird-like dinosaurs appeared to be younger than Archaeopteryx itself, creating apparent paradoxes in the evolutionary timeline. Others questioned whether the similarities between birds and dinosaurs might be superficial, the result of similar lifestyles rather than shared ancestry. A few proposed alternative theories, suggesting that birds might have evolved from more ancient reptiles, bypassing dinosaurs entirely. These debates played out in scientific journals with a passion that surprised outside observers. Papers were published and rebutted. Conferences became battlegrounds of competing interpretations, and personal relationships sometimes suffered under the weight of scientific disagreement. Yet this very intensity reflected the profound importance of the questions being asked. Understanding bird origins was not just about cataloguing the past. It was about comprehending the fundamental processes that shape life on Earth. As the evidence continued to accumulate, however, the weight of data began to tip decisively in favor of the dinosaur-bird connection. New analytical techniques allowed scientists to construct increasingly detailed family trees, mapping the relationships between extinct and living species with unprecedented precision. Computer models could test hypotheses about flight evolution, biomechanics, and behavior in ways that had never been possible before. And most importantly, the sheer number of transitional fossils began to fill in the gaps that critics had identified in the evolutionary sequence. Perhaps the most compelling evidence came from an unexpected source: the study of modern bird development. By watching how chicks grow in their eggs, scientists could observe evolution in action as ancient developmental programs unfolded in modern creatures. The embryonic bird, they discovered, passed through stages that eerily echoed its dinosaurian ancestry. Temporary teeth appeared and disappeared. Claws developed on wing buds before being reabsorbed. Even the long bony tail of ancestral dinosaurs made a brief appearance before transforming into the compact pygostyle that anchors modern tail feathers. These developmental studies revealed that evolution is not just about adding new features. but about modifying existing developmental programs in subtle ways. The difference between a dinosaur hand and a bird wing, it turned out, lay not in completely different structures, but in small changes to the timing and expression of genes that controlled growth. A few molecular switches, altered over millions of years of evolution, could transform a grasping claw into a flight feather support, a ground-pounding leg into a delicate perch, a snapping jaw into a seed-cracking beak. The implications extended far beyond paleontology. If birds truly were dinosaurs, then dinosaurs had not vanished from the earth at all. They surrounded us every day, singing from trees, soaring overhead, and nesting under our eaves. The Great Extinction event took on new meaning as a transformation rather than an ending, a bottleneck that eliminated the giants while preserving the small and adaptable. In a very real sense, we were still living in the age of dinosaurs. We had simply grown so accustomed to their feathered descendants that we had forgotten their true nature. This perspective brought a new richness to the study of both fossil and living creatures. Every behavior observed in modern birds became a potential window into dinosaur behavior. Did Tyrannosaurus rex court mates with elaborate displays, as many birds do today? Did plant-eating dinosaurs migrate in great flocks, following food sources across ancient continents? Did they sing, dance, build elaborate nests, or engage in the complex social behaviors that characterize their modern relatives? The questions multiplied faster than answers could be found, each discovery opening new avenues of inquiry. Scientists began to look at familiar fossils with fresh eyes, searching for evidence of behaviors and characteristics they had never thought to consider. Museum storage rooms yielded new treasures as specimens collected decades earlier were re-examined with modern techniques and theoretical frameworks. Yet even as the scientific solid consensus defied around the dinosaur-bird connection, mysteries remained that kept researchers awake at night. The origin of flight itself remained contentious, with competing theories about whether it began with ground-dwelling runners launching themselves into the air, or tree-dwelling gliders gradually improving their aerial abilities. The role of feathers in this process was equally puzzling. Had they evolved specifically for flight, or had flight been a happy accident resulting from feathers that originally served other purposes? The mystery of flight's origin led scientists down fascinating paths of investigation, each more intriguing than the last. In laboratories around the world, researchers began building sophisticated computer models that could simulate the aerodynamics of ancient creatures, testing whether a microraptor could truly glide from tree to tree, or whether the wing-flapping motions of early birds could generate enough lift to achieve sustained flight. These digital experiments revealed surprising insights about the physics of prehistoric flight, showing that even seemingly awkward combinations of features could work together in unexpected ways. Meanwhile, the field, indent, paleontologists discovered that the story of feathers was far more complex than anyone had imagined. The simple hair-like structures found on early dinosaurs like Sinosauropteryx represented just the beginning of a remarkable evolutionary journey. As scientists traced the development of feathers through the fossil record, they uncovered a progression of increasing complexity that read like nature's own engineering manual. Simple filaments gave way to branch structures, which in turn evolved into the asymmetrical flight feathers that make powered flight possible. But perhaps the most remarkable discovery was that feathers had been experimenting with functions long before flight entered the picture. Some dinosaurs used them for display, sporting brilliant crests and tail fans have made that were peacock jealous. Others employed them for temperature regulation, wrapping themselves in downy coats that helped them maintain the high metabolic rates necessary for active lifestyles. Still others may have used them for brooding, creating warm, protective environments for their developing eggs, much as modern birds do today. This functional diversity suggested that flight had not been evolution's goal from the beginning, but rather an unexpected bonus that emerged from adaptations originally serving other purposes. It was a classic example of what scientists call exaptation, where features that evolved for one function are later co-opted for something entirely different. The wing that carries a modern eagle across mountain ranges began its evolutionary journey as insulation for a small dinosaur trying to stay warm in a cooling climate. The realization that evolution works through such indirect pathways challenged many people's intuitions about how complex systems develop. It's natural to assume that something as intricate as flight must have been planned, that each step along the way must have moved directly toward that goal. But nature, it seems, is far more creative and opportunistic than our linear thinking might suggest. It builds new solutions from whatever materials happen to be available, often discovering possibilities that no conscious designer would have considered. As this understanding deepened, scientists began to appreciate just how revolutionary the shift from dinosaur to bird had been, not just anatomically but physiologically. The transition required more than just growing feathers and hollow bones. It demanded a complete reorganization of internal systems to support the incredible energy demands of flight. Hearts had to be redesigned to pump blood efficiently at high altitudes. Respiratory systems had to be rebuilt to extract oxygen from thin air. Brains had to be rewired to process the complex three-dimensional information needed for aerial navigation. Yet perhaps the most astonishing aspect of this transformation was how much of it had already begun in land-dwelling dinosaurs. When researchers started examining the internal anatomy of various dinosaur species, they found evidence of air sacs extending throughout the skeleton, creating the kind of lightweight construction that birds use today. They discovered that some dinosaurs had developed the rapid growth rates and high metabolic activity that characterize warm-blooded animals. Most surprisingly of all, they found that certain dinosaur species had evolved brain structures remarkably similar to those that control flight in modern birds. These discoveries painted a picture of evolution as a gradual assembler of possibilities, building the components of flight long before they would be needed for their ultimate purpose. It was as if nature had been stockpiling tools in a workshop, not knowing exactly what they would be used for, but somehow accumulating everything necessary for a future innovation that was still millions of years away. The emotional impact of these revelations extended far beyond the scientific community. For many people, the idea that birds were living dinosaurs fundamentally changed their relationship with the natural world around them. A morning walk became a journey through a living museum, where every songbird carried the genetic memory of ancient giants. Children who had grown up fascinated by dinosaurs discovered that their backyard feeders hosted creatures just as remarkable as any that had roamed the Mesozoic landscape. This shift in perspective brought with it a new appreciation for the continuity of life across deep time. The great extinctions that had once seemed like final endings were revealed to be more like pruning events, eliminating some branches of life's tree while allowing others to flourish and diversify. The story of evolution became less about replacement and more about transformation, less about endings and more about endless creativity in the face of changing circumstances. Yet even as the scientific consensus solidified around the dinosaur-bird connection, new questions continued to emerge that pushed the boundaries of understanding ever further. Recent discoveries in Madagascar and other remote locations had begun to reveal that the transition from dinosaur to bird was even more complex and varied than previously imagined. Some lineages had apparently evolved flight independently, following different evolutionary pathways to achieve the same remarkable result. Others had developed intermediate forms of aerial locomotion that had no modern analogues, representing evolutionary experiments that had flourished for millions of years before ultimately going extinct. These findings suggested that the story of bird evolution was not a single narrative, but a collection of parallel stories, each following its own trajectory through the landscape of evolutionary possibility. Some led to the familiar birds we know today, while others explored alternatives that we can barely imagine. The sky of the Mesozoic era had been filled not just with early birds, but with a diverse array of flying creatures that had taken different approaches to mastering the air. One particularly intriguing group of fossils had begun to emerge from deposits in South America, revealing creatures that seemed to bridge the gap between the feathered dinosaurs of Asia and the more familiar birds of later periods. These intermediate forms showed a bewildering variety of wing shapes, body proportions, and flight adaptations, as if nature had been conducting a vast experiment in aerial design. Some had wings that were too small for sustained flight but perfect for gliding between trees. Others had developed novel combinations of features that modern engineering might dismiss as impossible, yet somehow worked in the context of their ancient environments. The study of these transitional forms required new approaches that combined traditional paleontology with cutting-edge technology. Researchers began using particle accelerators to peer inside fossilized bones, revealing microscopic details of internal structure that had been preserved for over 100 million years. They employed advanced chemical analysis to detect traces of original proteins and pigments, painting pictures of ancient creatures in colors that had been lost for eons. Most remarkably, they developed techniques for examining fossilized soft tissues, uncovering evidence of muscles, tendons, and even blood vessels that had somehow escaped the usual processes of decay. Each new technological breakthrough brought fresh insights, but also raised new questions that pushed the boundaries of what seemed possible to know about the ancient past. Could scientists eventually decode the actual DNA of extinct creatures, reading the genetic instructions that had built the first birds? Might they discover evidence of behaviors and social structures that had left no obvious traces in the fossil record? The questions multiplied with each discovery, creating an ever-expanding frontier of mystery and possibility. As researchers delved deeper into the mechanics of how dinosaurs had become birds, they began to uncover evidence of just how gradual and complex this transformation had been. It wasn't simply a matter of adding feathers to a dinosaur and teaching it to fly. It required coordinated changes across multiple body systems, all somehow working together to create something entirely new. The timing had to be precise, the proportions exactly right, the integration seamless. Any misstep along the way could have led to evolutionary dead ends rather than successful innovations. This realization brought a new appreciation for the delicate balance that governs evolutionary change. Major transitions like the evolution of flight required not just the right mutations, but the right environment, the right timing, and often a considerable amount of luck. The fact that it had happened at all seemed almost miraculous, a convergence of circumstances so unlikely that it challenged our understanding of probability itself. Yet life had somehow managed this improbable transformation not once, but multiple times, as different lineages found their own pathways to the sky. Each success story represented millions of years of gradual refinement, countless generations of creatures testing the boundaries of what was possible, pushing against the constraints of physics and biology until something remarkable emerged. The implications stretched beyond paleontology into philosophy, raising profound questions about the nature of change, possibility, and the creative power of time itself. If such radical transformations were possible in the past, what might be possible in the future? What new forms might life explore as environments continue to change and new challenges arise? The story of how dinosaurs became birds was not just a tale from the distant past, but a reminder that evolution's creativity knows no bounds, that life will always find new ways to surprise us with its ingenuity and adaptability. As we drift deeper into this ancient mystery, we find ourselves confronting not just questions about birds and dinosaurs, but fundamental puzzles about the nature of life itself, about how the impossible becomes inevitable given enough time and opportunity, about how the most unlikely transformations can become the foundations for entirely new chapters in the story of life on Earth. The deeper we venture into this labyrinth of feathers and bones, the more we discover that the greatest mysteries often hide in the smallest details. In laboratories scattered across the world, scientists have begun to examine fossilized feathers with instruments so powerful they can reveal the microscopic structures that once produced color. What they found challenged everything we thought we knew about the prehistoric world. The first breakthrough came when researchers realized that some of the dark stains surrounding certain fossils weren't just mineral deposits, but the preserved remains of melanosomes, tiny cellular structures that had once held pigment. Under electron microscopes, these ancient color bearers revealed their secrets. Some were rod-shaped, indicating black pigmentation. Others were spherical, suggesting browns and reds. Most remarkably, some showed the complex layered structures that create iridescent blues and greens in modern birds. Suddenly, the grey world of museum reconstructions burst into colour. Scientists could now paint portraits of dinosaurs as they truly were, not the drab olive and brown creatures of old illustrations, but vibrant beings that might have shimmered with copper highlights or blazed with crimson crests. A small dinosaur called Borreliopelta was revealed to have been rusty red on top with a pale belly, a coloration pattern that suggested it used countershading to blend into its environment despite weighing more than a car. These discoveries transformed our understanding of dinosaur behaviour in ways that went far beyond mere aesthetics. Colour, after all, is rarely just about beauty in the natural world. It serves purposes that cut to the heart of survival itself. Those brilliant blues and iridescent greens suggested that some dinosaurs engaged in elaborate courtship displays, just as many modern birds do today. The presence of countershading hinted at predator-prey relationships and camouflage strategies that had played out across ancient landscapes. Even the simple presence of complex coloration indicated that these creatures possessed the visual systems necessary to perceive and respond to such displays. But perhaps the most significant revelation came from studying the distribution of colour across dinosaur bodies. In many species, the most vibrant pigmentation was concentrated in areas that modern birds use for communication, around the head, tail, and wingtips. This pattern suggested that long before the first bird took flight, dinosaurs were already using visual signals to communicate with potential mates, warn off rivals, and coordinate group activities. The implications rippled through paleontology like waves in a still pond. If dinosaurs had been engaging in complex social behaviours, what did this mean for our understanding of their intelligence, their family structures, their migration patterns? The evidence began to accumulate from multiple sources, painting a picture of creatures far more sophisticated than anyone had imagined. Fossilized trackways revealed that many dinosaur species traveled in organized herds, with adults positioned to protect juveniles from predators. Nesting sites showed evidence of parental care that extended far beyond simply laying eggs and walking away. Some species built elaborate structures, arranging vegetation and stones in patterns that suggested aesthetic sensibilities, as well as functional purposes. Contents revealed dietary fossilized stomach preferences and seasonal migration patterns that spoke to complex ecological relationships. As this new understanding of dinosaur behavior emerged, it became increasingly difficult to draw clear lines between the social complexity of ancient dinosaurs and modern birds. The more scientists learned about both groups, the more the distinctions seemed to dissolve. Birds inherited not just the physical structures of their dinosaur ancestors, but apparently their behavioural repertoires as well. This realisation brought with it a profound shift in how we think about extinction and continuity. The great dying at the end of the Cretaceous period began to look less like a complete replacement of one type of life with another, and more like a selective pruning that preserved certain lineages while eliminating others. The survivors weren't just lucky, they were the inheritors of behavioural and physiological adaptations that had been refined over millions of years of dinosaur evolution. Yet even as the evidence for dinosaur-bird continuity mounted, new discoveries continued to complicate the simple narrative that textbooks preferred. In the remote badlands of Argentina, paleontologists uncovered fossils that seemed to tell a different story entirely. Here were birds from the early Cenozoic era, the time period immediately following the dinosaur extinction, that were unlike anything alive today. Some were giants, flightless predators that stood taller than a human and possessed beaks like axes. Others retained teeth and claws that seemed more reptilian than avian. Most puzzling of all were species that appeared to have been experimenting with entirely different approaches to flight, using wing configurations and body proportions that defied modern understanding of aerodynamics. These discoveries revealed that the transition from dinosaur to modern bird had not been a smooth, linear progression, but rather a period of explosive experimentation. In the aftermath of the Great Extinction, surviving bird lineages had diversified into ecological niches that would later be filled by mammals. Some became apex predators, others specialized scavengers. Still others evolved into forms so bizarre that paleontologists struggled to understand how they might have lived. The fossil record from this period read like a catalogue of evolutionary experiments, most of which ultimately failed. Giant predatory birds eventually gave way to mammalian carnivores. Teeth were lost in favor of specialized beaks. The extreme diversity of early bird forms gradually consolidated into the more familiar patterns we see today. Yet this period of wild experimentation demonstrated just how much evolutionary potential had been locked away in the dinosaur lineage, waiting for the right circumstances to be unleashed. As scientists traced these post-extinction radiations, they began to appreciate the role that catastrophe had played in shaping the modern world. The asteroid impact that ended the Mesozoic era had not simply cleared the stage for mammals to take over. It had also freed bird evolution from the constraints that had limited it during the age of dinosaurs. Without large ground-dwelling dinosaurs occupying terrestrial niches, early birds could explore new ways of life that would have been impossible in their ancestors' time. This perspective cast the Great Extinction in a new light. Rather than being simply destructive, it had also been creative, opening up new possibilities that might never have been explored otherwise. The catastrophe that ended one chapter of Earth's history had simultaneously begun another, setting in motion evolutionary processes that would eventually produce the incredible diversity of modern bird life. The story took another unexpected turn when researchers began examining the genetic codes of living birds with unprecedented precision. DNA sequencing technology had advanced to the point where scientists could read entire genomes, comparing the genetic instructions that build different species and tracing their evolutionary relationships with molecular precision. What they found challenged many assumptions about how bird evolution had proceeded. The traditional approach to understanding evolutionary relationships had relied heavily on comparing anatomical features, assuming that creatures with similar bones must be closely related. But genetic analysis revealed that evolution had been far more creative than this approach suggested. Some birds that looked very similar were actually quite distantly related, having independently evolved similar features in response to similar environmental pressures. Others that appeared quite different shared recent common ancestors, their divergent appearances reflecting rapid evolutionary change rather than ancient separations. Perhaps most surprisingly, the genetic data revealed that modern bird diversity had exploded in a relatively short period following the dinosaur extinction. Rather than gradually diversifying over tens of millions of years, most major bird lineages appeared to have separated from each other in a burst of evolutionary activity that lasted only a few million years. This rapid radiation had been so swift that it had left few intermediate forms in the fossil record, creating gaps that had puzzled paleontologists for generations. The molecular clock, as scientists called this genetic approach to dating evolutionary events, also revealed unexpected patterns in the timing of bird evolution. Some lineages that appeared primitive based on their anatomy turned out to be relatively recent evolutionary innovations. Others that seemed advanced were actually quite ancient, having maintained their basic body plans for tens of millions of years, while other groups experimented with new forms. These discoveries forced scientists to reconsider fundamental questions about how evolution works. Was the burst of diversification following the dinosaur extinction typical of how life responds to major environmental changes? Or was it something unique in Earth's history? Did similar patterns of rapid evolution occur in other groups during times of environmental stress? And what did these patterns suggest about the future of evolution in our rapidly changing modern world? The questions multiplied as researchers applied similar techniques to studying other major transitions in the history of life. The evolution of mammals, the diversification of flowering plants, the origin of complex cells, all began to reveal similar patterns of rapid change punctuating long periods of relative stability. Evolution, it seemed, did not always proceed at the steady, gradual pace that Darwin had envisioned. Sometimes it moved in sudden bursts, exploring vast territories of possibility in geological instants. This new understanding of evolutionary tempo brought fresh perspectives to the dinosaur-bird transition. Rather than being a slow, steady transformation spread across millions of years, the key innovations that enabled flight might have appeared relatively quickly once the right conditions were in place. The transition from feathered dinosaur to flying bird might have been more like crossing a threshold than climbing a gradual slope. Yet even as scientists refined their understanding of when and how quickly bird evolution had proceeded, the question of why it had happened at all remained tantalizingly elusive. What environmental pressures had favored the development of flight? What advantages had early birds possessed that allowed them to survive the Great Extinction while their non-flying relatives perished? The answers, as they emerged from fossil sites and computer models, painted a picture of a world in transition. The late Cretaceous period had been a time of significant environmental change, with sea levels fluctuating, climates shifting, and ecosystems reorganizing themselves in response to geological upheaval. In such a dynamic world, the ability to move quickly between different habitats would have been invaluable. Flight offered more than just mobility. It provided access to resources that were unavailable to ground-bound creatures. Early birds could exploit insect populations in the forest canopy, reach fruit and seeds on tall trees, and escape predators that were confined to terrestrial environments. They could also disperse their offspring across wide areas, reducing competition and increasing their chances of finding suitable habitat. But perhaps most importantly, flight provided a buffer against environmental catastrophe. When the asteroid struck at the end of the Cretaceous, it triggered a cascade of environmental changes that devastated terrestrial ecosystems. The ability to fly meant that early birds could potentially escape local disasters, find refuge in distant areas, and survive on resources that were inaccessible to other animals. This survival advantage, however, came at a cost. Flight demanded high energy expenditures and imposed strict constraints on body size and structure. Early birds had to maintain the delicate balance between being light enough to fly and robust enough to survive in a dangerous world. They needed sophisticated navigation systems to find their way across unfamiliar landscapes and complex physiological mechanisms to regulate their body temperature during long flights. The fossil record suggests that this balancing act was not easy to achieve. Many early experiments in flight ended in evolutionary dead ends, lineages that developed partial flying abilities but could not make the complete transition to aerial life. The path from dinosaur to bird was littered with almost birds, creatures that came tantalizingly close to achieving sustained flight but ultimately fell short of the mark. Yet those that succeeded in making the transition gained access to a way of life that would prove remarkably resilient. Unlike their ground-dwelling relatives, early birds were not locked into specific geographical regions or dependent on particular types of habitat. They could adapt to changing conditions by simply flying somewhere else, a flexibility that would serve them well during the environmental upheavals that marked the end of the Mesozoic era. As we drift further into this ancient narrative, we find ourselves confronting the remarkable fact that this flexibility persists today. Modern birds continue to demonstrate the adaptive advantages that first emerged in their dinosaurian ancestors. They migrate across continents, following seasonal resources and escaping harsh weather. They exploit habitats from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforests, from desert oases to urban environments. They have diversified into forms that would seem impossible to creatures confined to a single way of life. The hummingbird that hovers at your window, the albatross that soars across oceans, the penguin that swims through Antarctic waters, all represent different solutions to the challenge of aerial existence. Each has refined the basic innovations of their dinosaur ancestors in ways that allow them to thrive in specific environments and exploit particular ecological niches. Yet beneath their superficial differences lies the shared heritage of creatures that learn to dance with gravity itself. This heritage connects every modern bird to the deep past in ways that continue to surprise and delight researchers. The complex breathing system that allows a bar-headed goose to fly over Mount Everest traces its origins to the air sacs of dinosaurs that lived in very different environments. The intricate feather structures that enable silent flight in owls represent refinements of innovations that first appeared in creatures that may never have left the ground. The magnetic navigation systems that guide migratory birds across thousands of miles build upon sensory capabilities that were already present in their terrestrial ancestors. Each discovery adds another thread to the tapestry that connects past and present, showing how evolution builds new solutions from ancient foundations. The story of bird evolution becomes not just a tale of transformation, but a testament to the creative power of time itself, to the way that small changes accumulate across millions of years to produce results that seem almost magical in their complexity and beauty. Yet even as our understanding deepens, new mysteries continue to emerge from the stones. Recent discoveries in Madagascar have revealed bird fossils with features so unusual that they challenge existing categories and force scientists to reconsider their assumptions about avian evolution. In the amber deposits of Myanmar, researchers have found feathers preserved in such exquisite detail that they can study the microscopic structures that control flight performance. In the deep ocean sediments, chemical signatures hint at ancient bird migrations that spanned continents long before humans walked the earth. Each new discovery adds another layer to this ancient puzzle, yet simultaneously reveals how much more there is to learn. In laboratories where the hum of electron microscopes creates a constant whisper of investigation, scientists are uncovering details that would have seemed impossible just decades ago. They can now examine individual cells within fossilized bones, revealing growth patterns that speak to how quickly young dinosaurs matured and how their metabolisms compared to those of modern birds. They can trace blood vessel pathways through ancient skulls, mapping the neural networks that once controlled flight reflexes and navigation instincts. The technology that makes these revelations possible continues to evolve at a breathtaking pace. Synchrotron radiation facilities, originally designed for physics research, now serve as time machines that peer into the molecular structure of fossils without destroying them. These massive machines generate beams of light so intense they can reveal the chemical composition of materials that have been locked in stone for over 100 million years. When paleontologists subject tools to this dinosaur foss treatment, they sometimes find traces of original organic compounds, ghostly remnants of proteins and lipids that somehow survived the seemingly impossible journey from living tissue to fossil stone. Perhaps even more remarkable are the recent advances in understanding how genes control development. Scientists can now manipulate the genetic switches that determine how embryonic birds grow, temporarily reactivating ancient developmental programs that have been dormant for millions of years. By adjusting the expression of just a few key genes, researchers have coaxed modern chicken embryos to develop teeth, reminiscent of their dinosaurian ancestors. They have extended the growth of tail vertebrae, creating structures that echo the long bony tails of prehistoric birds. These experiments don't create living dinosaurs, but they reveal how malleable the boundary between past and present truly is. The implications extend far beyond the laboratory. If scientists can reactivate ancient genetic programs in modern animals, it suggests that evolution doesn't discard old innovations completely, but rather tucks them away like tools in a workshop, ready to be retrieved if circumstances demand. This genetic archaeology reveals that every living bird carries within its DNA a library of ancestral possibilities, instructions for building structures and systems that haven't been used for millions of years, but could potentially be awakened under the right conditions. This perspective transforms how we think about evolutionary change itself. Rather than being a process of constant innovation, evolution appears to be more like a master craftsman who rarely throws anything away. Old solutions are modified, repurposed, and combined in new ways rather than being completely replaced. The wing of a modern bird incorporates engineering principles that first appeared in dinosaur arms, breathing systems that evolved for terrestrial life, and color patterns that may have originally served entirely different purposes. The fossil record continues to yield surprises that illuminate this creative recycling process. In China, paleontologists recently uncovered specimens of Anchiornis, a small dinosaur that lived about 160 million years ago and was covered from head to toe in black feathers with distinctive white wing markings. Computer models suggest that while Anchiornis could not achieve powered flight, it was an accomplished glider that used its 4 wings to move through the forest canopy with remarkable agility. Here was a creature that had assembled many of the components necessary for flight, yet used them for a completely different type of aerial locomotion. The discovery of Anchiornis and similar species revealed that the evolution of flight was far more experimental than anyone had imagined. Nature had apparently tried multiple approaches to conquering the air, some successful, others evolutionary dead ends, that nonetheless contributed to our understanding of what was possible. 4-winged gliders like Anchiornis represented one path that ultimately led nowhere, yet their existence demonstrated the incredible creativity that characterized this crucial period in vertebrate evolution. Meanwhile, other lineages were exploring solutions different to the challenge of aerial life. Some developed enlarged pectoral muscles for powerful wing strokes. Others evolved longer arms that could support larger wing surfaces. Still others experimented with different feather types, creating structures optimized for gliding, flapping, or display than the multi-purpose feathers of modern birds. Each approach represented millions of years of refinement, countless generations of creatures testing the boundaries of aerodynamic possibility. The sheer diversity of these ancient experiments raises profound questions about the nature of evolutionary innovation. How many potential solutions to the problem of flight existed? How many were tried and abandoned? And what does this diversity tell us about the creative potential that lies dormant in lineages that seem to have settled into stable evolutionary patterns? Recent work on the developmental biology of feathers has begun to provide some answers to these questions. Scientists have discovered that feather development is controlled by a relatively simple set of genetic instructions that can produce an enormous variety of outcomes, depending on how they are expressed. Small changes in the timing or intensity of these developmental programs can create feathers optimized for insulation, display, flight, or waterproofing. The basic toolkit for feather construction appears to have been established very early in dinosaur evolution. But different lineages use this toolkit to create structures perfectly suited to their particular needs. This modular approach to evolutionary innovation helps explain how such complex structures could evolve so quickly once the basic components were in place. Rather than having to invent flight from scratch, early birds could mix and match existing developmental programs to create new combinations of features. A slight modification to feather development here, a small change in wing proportions there, and suddenly a ground-dwelling dinosaur could become an aerial acrobat. The process wasn't always smooth or direct, however. The fossil record is filled with creatures that seem to represent evolutionary experiments that didn't quite work out. There are dinosaurs with feathers that were apparently too primitive for flight, others with wing structures that seem aerodynamically questionable, and still others with combinations of features that modern engineering would reject as impossible. Yet somehow, through trial and error across millions of years, nature eventually stumbled upon combinations that worked brilliantly. One of the most intriguing aspects of this evolutionary experimentation is how it reveals the role that environmental change played in driving innovation. Many of the most dramatic developments in dinosaur-to-bird evolution appear to have occurred during periods of significant climate change, when established ecosystems were breaking down and new opportunities were opening up. It was as if environmental instability created windows of possibility that allowed evolution to explore territories it might never have entered under stable conditions. The late Jurassic period, when many of the most bird-like dinosaurs first appeared, was marked by rising sea levels, changing climate patterns, and the fragmentation of the supercontinent Pangaea. These changes created new ecological niches and put pressure on existing species to adapt or perish. In such a dynamic environment, the ability to move quickly between different habitats or exploit previously inaccessible resources would have provided enormous advantages. Flight offered the ultimate solution to environmental uncertainty. A creature that could fly could escape local disasters, track seasonal resources across vast distances, and colonize new territories as they became available. This flexibility came at the cost of increased complexity, however. Flying creatures needed sophisticated navigation systems, efficient metabolisms, and precise neuromuscular control. They also needed to maintain their aerial capabilities while adapting to different environments and food sources. The challenge of maintaining flight while adapting to diverse ecological niches helps explain the remarkable diversity of modern birds. Each species represents a different solution to the problem of combining aerial capability with specialized lifestyle requirements. Arctic terns optimize for long-distance migration, hummingbirds for precision hovering, penguins for underwater flight through dense water, and ostriches for high-speed terrestrial locomotion, despite having given up flight entirely. This diversity reflects the fundamental flexibility that flight provides. Unlike terrestrial or aquatic animals, which are largely constrained to specific types of habitat, flying creatures can potentially access almost any environment on Earth. This freedom has allowed birds to diversify into ecological niches that would be impossible for other vertebrates to occupy. They can feed on nectar high in forest canopies, catch insects in mid-air, dive for fish in deep ocean waters, or scavenge carrion across vast landscapes. The evolutionary success of birds also highlights the importance of behavioral innovation in driving adaptive radiation. Many of the most successful bird lineages are those that developed complex social behaviors, sophisticated communication systems, and flexible learning abilities. These behavioral innovations allowed them to exploit their aerial capabilities more effectively and adapt quickly to changing environmental conditions. The study of modern bird cognition has revealed surprising parallels with their dinosaurian ancestors. Many birds display problem-solving abilities that rival those of primates, use tools with remarkable sophistication, and engage in cultural transmission of learned behaviors across generations. These cognitive capabilities may have ancient roots, representing refinements of neural systems that first evolved in dinosaurs for entirely different purposes. Recent discoveries of dinosaur trace fossils have provided tantalizing hints about the behavioral complexity of these ancient creatures. Fossilized footprints reveal evidence of herding behavior, seasonal migration patterns, and complex social structures. Some sites preserve evidence of elaborate nesting colonies where hundreds of individuals gathered to breed, suggesting levels of social coordination that would not be out of place in modern bird communities. The preservation of such behavioral evidence is extraordinarily rare, making each discovery precious beyond measure. These glimpses into dinosaur behavior help bridge the gap between the anatomical evidence of fossilized bones and the rich behavioral repertoires of modern birds. They suggest that the evolution from dinosaur to bird involved not just physical transformation, but also the inheritance and refinement of complex behavioral patterns that had been developing for millions of years. As scientists continue to explore these connections between ancient and modern behavior, They are uncovering evidence that challenges traditional boundaries between instinct and learning, between genetic programming and cultural transmission. Many bird behaviors that were once thought to be purely instinctual are now known to involve significant learning components, with young birds acquiring essential skills through observation and practice. This flexibility in behavioral development may have been crucial for the survival of early birds during periods of rapid environmental change. The fossil record suggests that this behavioral flexibility was already present in some dinosaur lineages, long before the evolution of flight. Evidence of parental care, complex nesting behaviors, and even possible tool use has been found in various dinosaur species, suggesting that the cognitive foundations for bird intelligence were established early in dinosaur evolution and later co-opted for the challenges of aerial life. This deeper understanding of the behavioral continuity between dinosaurs and birds has profound implications for how we think about intelligence and consciousness in extinct species. If modern birds inherited not just the physical structures, but also the neural architectures and behavioral repertoires of their dinosaurian ancestors, then many dinosaurs may have been far more cognitively sophisticated than traditionally assumed. The implications ripple outward into questions about the nature of consciousness itself. If some dinosaurs possess the neural complexity necessary for the kinds of sophisticated behaviors we observe in modern birds, did they experience something analogous to what we might call awareness or even emotion? The question may be unanswerable with current scientific methods, but it highlights how profoundly our understanding of prehistoric life has changed as the connections between dinosaurs and birds have become clearer. These philosophical dimensions of the dinosaur-bird connection remind us that science is not just about cataloguing facts, but about expanding our sense of wonder and our understanding of our place in the natural world. Every fossil that emerges from ancient rock formations is not just a specimen to be measured and classified, but a messenger from deep time carrying stories that can transform how we see the world around us. The gentle robin outside your window becomes a living link to creatures that witnessed the breakup of continents and the birth of mountain ranges. The hawk circling overhead carries genetic memories of forests that existed when flowering plants were evolutionary novelties. Even the humble pigeon navigating city streets possesses sensory capabilities and neural circuits that were refined across millions of years of dinosaur evolution. This perspective transforms every encounter with birds into an opportunity for wonder, a chance to glimpse the deep history that surrounds us in the everyday world. It reminds us that we live in a time when dinosaurs still walk, or rather fly, among us, that the age of giants never truly ended, but simply transformed into something new and equally remarkable. As we continue this gentle journey through deep time, following the thread that connects feathered dinosaurs to modern birds, we find ourselves standing at the intersection of multiple scientific disciplines, each contributing pieces to a puzzle that grows more complex and beautiful with every new discovery. The story we are uncovering is not just about the evolution of flight or the survival of dinosaurs, but about the fundamental creativity of life itself, about the endless ways that evolution finds to explore new possibilities and adapt to changing circumstances. The story deepens as we examine one of the most contentious aspects of this ancient puzzle, the question of timing that has troubled paleontologists for decades. When scientists first began proposing that birds evolved from dinosaurs, critics pointed to what seemed like an insurmountable problem in the fossil record. The earliest known bird, Archaeopteryx, lived approximately 150 million years ago during the late Jurassic period. Yet many of the most bird-like dinosaurs, the very creatures proposed as close relatives to early birds, appeared to be younger than Archaeopteryx itself, living during the Cretaceous period that followed. This temporal paradox created what researchers called the chronological conundrum. How could birds have evolved from dinosaurs that lived millions of years after the first birds had already taken to the skies? It was like suggesting children that grand given birth to their own grandparents, a logical impossibility that seemed to undermine the entire theory of dinosaurian bird origins. For years, This timing problem provided ammunition for skeptics who argued that birds must have evolved from more ancient reptiles, bypassing dinosaurs entirely. They proposed alternative family trace trees that bird ancestry back to earlier archosaurs, the broad group of reptiles that included dinosaurs, crocodiles, and their relatives. In these alternative scenarios, birds and dinosaurs were seen as sister groups that had diverged from a common ancestor, evolving their similar features independently rather than through direct descent. The debate played out in scientific conferences with the intensity of a courtroom drama. Proponents of dinosaurian bird origins argued that the fossil record was incomplete, that older bird-like dinosaurs would eventually be discovered to fill the temporal gaps. Their opponents countered that the absence of evidence was itself evidence, that the missing fossils were a fundamental flaw in the theory rather than merely an incomplete sampling of ancient life. Yet as paleontologists continued their patient work in fossil fields around the world, the temporal paradox began to resolve itself in unexpected ways. New discoveries pushed the origin of bird-like dinosaurs further back in time, while simultaneously revealing that the diversity of early birds was far greater than Archaeopteryx alone had suggested. The picture that emerged was not of a simple linear progression from dinosaur to bird, but of a complex family tree with multiple branches exploring different approaches to aerial life. One of the most significant breakthroughs came from the Tiaojishan Formation in China, where researchers uncovered fossils of Anchiornis that dated to approximately 160 million years ago, predating Archaeopteryx by nearly 10 million years. Here was a creature that possessed many bird-like features, yet was clearly more closely related to dinosaurs than to modern birds. Its discovery helped fill one of the crucial gaps in the evolutionary timeline, showing that bird-like dinosaurs had indeed preceded the earliest known birds. But Anchiornis was not alone in the ancient skies. Other discoveries from similarly aged deposits revealed a diverse community of early flying and gliding creatures, each experimenting with different solutions to the challenge of aerial locomotion. Some, like Xiaotingia, seemed to occupy positions on the evolutionary tree that blurred the distinction between bird and dinosaur almost beyond recognition. Others, like the various species of Rhahonavis, appeared to be dinosaurs that had independently evolved some bird-like features. These discoveries transformed the temporal paradox from a problem into a window of insight. Rather than birds evolving from a single dinosaur ancestor, the fossil record began to suggest a more complex pattern of evolutionary experimentation. Multiple dinosaur lineages had apparently developed bird-like characteristics during the late Jurassic and early Cretaceous periods, with some eventually giving rise to modern birds, while others represented evolutionary experiments that ultimately led nowhere. This pattern of parallel evolution, known as convergent evolution, helped explain why so many dinosaurs shared bird-like features. The environmental pressures of the late Mesozoic era had apparently favored certain anatomical innovations across multiple lineages. Hollow bones, enlarged brains, sophisticated respiratory systems, and even feathers had evolved repeatedly in different groups, creating a mosaic of bird-like characteristics scattered across the dinosaur family tree. The realization that bird-like features had evolved multiple times independently added new complexity to the question of bird origins. If several dinosaur lineages had developed similar adaptations, which one had actually given rise to modern birds? The answer required increasingly sophisticated analytical techniques that could distinguish between features inherited from common ancestors and those that had evolved independently in response to similar environmental pressures. Molecular phylogenetics, the science of using genetic information to reconstruct evolutionary relationships, provided some of the most powerful tools for addressing these questions. By comparing the DNA sequences of modern birds with those of their closest living relatives, crocodiles, scientists could work backwards to infer the characteristics of their common ancestors. These molecular family trees consistently supported the idea that birds were nested within the dinosaur family tree, specifically within a group of predatory dinosaurs called theropods. Yet, even as the molecular evidence strengthened the case for dinosaurian bird origins, new fossil discoveries continued to complicate the story in fascinating ways. In Madagascar, researchers uncovered remains of Rahanavis, a creature that possessed the long arms and clawed hands typical of dinosaurs, yet also had clear adaptations for flight. Its discovery raised intriguing questions about how many times flight had evolved independently within dinosaur lineages. Similarities emerged from deposits Puz in Argentina, where paleontologists found fossils of Unanlagia, another dinosaur that seemed to possess flight adaptations despite living long after the first birds had evolved. These discoveries suggested that the transition from terrestrial to aerial life had not been a one-time event, but rather a recurring theme in dinosaur evolution. Different lineages had apparently discovered flight independently, each following their own evolutionary pathway to the skies. The pattern of multiple flight origins helped explain another puzzle that had long troubled researchers. Modern birds possess a unique wrist structure that allows them to fold their wings efficiently against their bodies when not in flight. This specialized joint, called the semilunate carpal, had been found in various dinosaur fossils, yet its presence in ground-dwelling creatures seemed mysterious. If these dinosaurs couldn't fly, why had they evolved such specialized wrist anatomy? The answer appeared to lie in the behavioral repertoire of these ancient creatures. Computer models and biomechanical analyses suggested that the flexible wrist joints had originally evolved to enhance the precision of grasping motions, allowing predatory dinosaurs to capture prey with quick, snapping movements of their arms. The same joint flexibility that made dinosaurs more effective hunters later proved invaluable for flight, providing the precise wing control necessary for powered flight. This pattern of behavioral pre-adaptation became a recurring theme in dinosaur-to-bird evolution. Time and again, features that had originally evolved for terrestrial purposes proved perfectly suited for aerial life. The hollow bones that made dinosaurs lighter and more agile runners also reduced the weight penalty of flight. The rapid metabolisms that fueled active hunting lifestyles provided the energy necessary for sustained wing beating. Even the complex respiratory systems that allowed efficient oxygen extraction during pursuit of prey later supported the high-altitude flights of early birds. These discoveries revealed that evolution rarely invents entirely new solutions to environmental challenges. Instead, it tends to modify existing structures and behaviors in ways that open up new possibilities. The transition from dinosaur to bird was not a revolutionary leap into uncharted territory, but rather a gradual exploration of possibilities that had been latent within dinosaur anatomy and physiology for millions of years. The concept of evolutionary pre-adaptation helped explain one of the most puzzling aspects of flight evolution. Complex systems like wings and feathers seem impossibly intricate to have evolved gradually, yet the fossil record clearly showed that they had done to this solution exactly that. The apparent paradox lay in recognizing that intermediate stages in the evolution of flight had served other functions entirely. Proto-wings could provide lift for jumping or gliding long before they became capable of powered flight. Early feathers could provide insulation or display coloration, while gradually developing the structural complexity necessary for flight. This insight transformed how scientists thought about evolutionary innovation more broadly. Rather than viewing complex adaptations as products of forward-looking design, they began to appreciate them as creative combinations of existing elements, repurposed and refined through countless generations of trial and error. Evolution emerged not as an engineer working toward predetermined goals, but as a tinkerer, constantly modifying and recombining available materials to meet immediate needs. The tinkering metaphor proved particularly apt when applied to the evolution of feathers themselves. These remarkable structures, which seemed so perfectly designed for flight, actually began their evolutionary journey serving entirely different purposes. The earliest feathers were simple, hair-like filaments that provided insulation for small dinosaurs struggling to maintain stable body temperatures. Over time, these basic structures were modified and elaborated, developing the branching patterns and interlocking barbules that create the smooth flight surfaces of modern bird wings. Yet even as feathers became increasingly sophisticated, they continued to serve multiple functions simultaneously. The same structures that provided lift during flight could also create striking visual displays for attracting mates or intimidating rivals. They could be molted and regrown seasonally to provide optimal insulation during cold periods, or enhanced flight performance during migration. This multifunctionality meant that natural selection could act on feathers for multiple reasons simultaneously, accelerating their evolutionary refinement. The study of feather evolution has revealed extraordinary details about how complex structures can emerge through gradual modification. Modern birds possess several different types of feathers, each optimized for specific functions. Down feathers provide insulation, contour feathers create smooth body profiles, and flight feathers generate the lift and thrust necessary for aerial locomotion. Yet, all of these specialized structures develop from the same basic developmental program, with small changes in gene expression creating dramatically different end products. This developmental flexibility has allowed birds to fine-tune their feather coats for specific ecological niches without requiring major genetic innovations. Arctic species can grow denser down for superior insulation, while tropical species can reduce their insulation load to prevent overheating. Diving birds can develop feathers with specialized structures that trap air for buoyancy, while desert species can create feathers that reflect solar radiation to maintain cool body temperatures. The versatility of the feather developmental system helps explain how birds were able to diversify so rapidly following the dinosaur extinction. Rather than being locked into rigid body plans like many other vertebrate groups, birds could quickly modify their external coverings to match new environmental demands. This flexibility, combined with their mobility and behavioral adaptability, positioned them perfectly to exploit the ecological opportunities that opened up in the post-extinction world. As we trace the threads of this ancient story, we find ourselves marveling at the intricate web of connections that link past and present. Every aspect of modern bird biology carries echoes of its dinosaurian heritage, from the hollow bones that lighten their skeletons to the complex respiratory systems that fuel their high-energy lifestyles. Even behaviors that seem uniquely avian, like elaborate courtship displays and sophisticated nest building, appear to have deep roots in dinosaur evolution. The recognition of these deep connections has transformed ontology from a descriptive palette of science focused on cataloguing extinct species into a dynamic that explores the processes discipline of evolutionary change itself. Each new fossil discovery adds another data point to our understanding of how major evolutionary transitions occur, how complex systems emerge from simpler components, and how life responds to environmental challenges across deep time. Yet perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the dinosaur-to-bird story is how it continues to unfold before our eyes. Modern birds are not static endpoints of an ancient evolutionary journey, but living experiments that continue to explore new possibilities within the constraints established by their dinosaurian heritage. They migrate across continents, dive to oceanic depths, soar to stratospheric heights, and adapt to human-modified environments in ways that would have seemed impossible to their Mesozoic ancestors. This ongoing evolution reminds us that the story we have been exploring is not just about the past, but about the present and future as well. The same evolutionary processes that transformed dinosaurs into birds continue to operate today, shaping the natural world in response to changing environmental conditions. Climate change, habitat fragmentation, and other human influences are creating new selective pressures that will undoubtedly leave their mark on future generations of birds. As we drift deeper into this contemplation of deep time and evolutionary change, we find ourselves confronting profound questions about the nature of life itself. Do simple chemical processes give rise to the complexity and beauty we see in living systems? What drives the endless creativity of evolution, the constant exploration of new forms and functions? And what does our growing understanding of these processes tell us about our own place in the grand story of life on Earth? The answers to these questions remain tantalizingly elusive, hidden somewhere in the interplay between genetic possibility and environmental opportunity that drives all evolutionary change. Yet each new discovery brings us closer to understanding the fundamental principles that govern life's endless capacity for transformation and adaptation. In the patient work of paleontologists, carefully extracting fossils from ancient rock, in the sophisticated analyses that reveal the molecular basis of evolutionary change, and in the ongoing observations of how modern species respond to environmental challenges, we glimpse the deeper patterns that connect all living things across the vast expanse of geological time. The story of how dinosaurs became birds is ultimately a story about the power of time itself, about how small changes accumulating across millions of years can produce transformations that seem almost magical in their scope and beauty. It reminds us that the natural world around us is not fixed and unchanging, but dynamic and creative, constantly exploring new possibilities within the constraints imposed by physics, chemistry, and the accumulated weight of evolutionary history. As we continue this gentle journey through the corridors of deep time, we encounter one of the most fascinating chapters in this ancient narrative, a discovery that would shake the very foundations of how we understand the relationship between past and present. In the remote badlands of Montana, where wind-carved stone reveals secrets from an age when the world was young, paleontologists working in the Hell Creek Formation made a discovery that seemed almost too extraordinary to believe. They found soft tissue, not just the mineralized bones that typically survive the long journey from death to fossil, but actual preserved soft tissue from a Tyrannosaurus rex that had died 68 million years ago. Under the microscope, they could see structures that looked remarkably like blood vessels, complete with what appeared to be red blood cells still trapped within their walls. The discovery challenged everything scientists thought they knew about the limits of preservation, about how long organic materials could survive in the geological record. The implications rippled through the paleontological community like stones thrown into a still pond. If soft tissues could survive for tens of millions of years, what other secrets might be hiding within fossils that had been studied for generations? More importantly, what could these preserved materials tell us about the biology of extinct creatures, about their physiology, their metabolism, their relationship to modern animals? The soft tissue discoveries opened entirely new avenues of investigation into the dinosaur-bird connection. For the first time, scientists could examine actual proteins from extinct dinosaurs, comparing their molecular structure to those of modern birds. The results were striking. Collagen proteins extracted from T-Rex fossils showed clear similarities to those of modern birds, more so than to crocodiles or other reptiles. Here was molecular evidence, written in the very building blocks of life, supporting the idea that dinosaurs and birds shared a close evolutionary relationship. But the story didn't end with protein analysis. As techniques for extracting and analyzing ancient biomolecules continued to improve, researchers began finding preserved soft tissues in dinosaur fossils from around the world. In China, they discovered dinosaur eggs with embryonic tissue so well preserved that they could study the cellular structure of developing baby dinosaurs. In Canada, Vadrasaurphos found hales with skin impressions so detailed that they could see individual scales and even traces of coloration patterns. Each new discovery added another piece to the growing puzzle of dinosaur biology. The preserved tissues revealed that many dinosaurs had been warm-blooded, with rapid growth rates and high metabolic activity similar to modern birds. Some showed evidence of complex parental care behaviors, with adults apparently tending to their young long after hatching. Others displayed signs of seasonal migration patterns, following food sources across ancient continents much as modern birds do today. Perhaps, most remarkably, some of these soft tissue discoveries provided direct evidence of feathers and feather-like structures in dinosaurs that had never before been suspected of possessing them. Under electron microscopes, researchers could see the preserved remnants of feather follicles, the tiny structures from which feathers grow. They could even identify melanosomes, the microscopic organelles that produce colour in feathers, allowing them to reconstruct the actual colours and patterns of dinosaurs that had lived over 100 million years ago. These discoveries painted a picture of the dinosaur world that was far more vibrant and dynamic than anyone had previously imagined. Rather than the drab, uniformly coloured creatures of older reconstructions, many dinosaurs emerged as brilliantly coloured animals that rivaled modern tropical birds in their visual splendour. Some sported iridescent patches that would have shimmered in the Mesozoic sunlight. Others displayed complex patterns of stripes and spots that may have served for camouflage, communication, or species recognition. The revelation that many dinosaurs were brightly coloured had profound implications for understanding their behaviour. In the modern world, bright colours in animals almost always serve social functions, helping individuals recognise potential mates, establish dominance hierarchies, or communicate with members of their species. The presence of such coloration in dinosaurs suggested that these ancient creatures had rich social lives, engaging in complex interactions that went far beyond simple predator-prey relationships. This understanding transformed how scientists interpreted dinosaur fossils. Bone beds that had once been viewed as simple death assemblages began to look more like evidence of complex social behaviours. Groups of dinosaurs found together might represent family units, with parents and offspring living and travelling together. Large accumulations of fossils could indicate seasonal gathering sites where multiple groups came together for breeding or migration. The evidence for complex dinosaur behaviour continued to accumulate from multiple sources. Fossilized trackways revealed that many species travelled in organised herds, with adults positioned to protect juveniles from predators. Nesting sites showed evidence of elaborate parental care, with some species apparently bringing food to their young and maintaining communal nesting colonies that could house hundreds of families. Some of the most intriguing evidence came from studying dinosaur eggs and nests. Rather than simply laying eggs and abandoning them, as many modern reptiles do, many dinosaurs appeared to have been devoted parents. They built complex nests, carefully arranged their eggs in spiral patterns, and may have even incubated them with their own body heat. Some fossil sites preserved evidence of adults that had died while apparently brooding their nests, suggesting levels of parental devotion that rivaled those of modern birds. These behavioural insights helped bridge another gap between dinosaurs and birds. The complex parental care behaviours that characterise modern birds didn't appear suddenly with the evolution of flight, but had deep roots in dinosaur evolution. The same neural circuits and hormonal systems that drive modern birds to build elaborate nests and care devotedly for their young were apparently already present in their terrestrial ancestors. The study of dinosaur reproduction revealed other surprising parallels with modern birds. Some species appeared to have had complex courtship rituals, with males displaying elaborate ornamentation to attract mates. Fossil sites in Mongolia have what preserve appear to be dinosaur dance floors, cleared areas where multiple individuals may have gathered for courtship displays. The idea of massive dinosaurs engaging in delicate courtship dances seems almost comical, yet such evidence suggests that behaviours were a regular part of their social lives. These discoveries fundamentally change ontologists' approach to how pale work. Rather than simply cataloguing anatomical features, they began to think about dinosaurs as complete organisms with complex behaviours, social structures, and ecological relationships. Each fossil became not just a specimen to be measured and described, but a window into an ancient world teeming with life and activity. The shift in perspective was perhaps most dramatic in how scientists began to interpret trace fossils, the preserved evidence bodies, foot than ancient prints, that of ancient behavior rather had once been viewed as simple records of movement, began to reveal complex stories about social behavior, seasonal migration, and predator-prey interactions. Coprolites, fossilized dung, became treasure troves of information about ancient diets, parasite loads, and ecosystem structure. Even bite marks on fossil bones took on new significance as evidence of behavior and social interaction. Rather than simply indicating predation events, they began to reveal information about hunting strategies, scavenging behaviors, and possibly even social dominance displays. Some bite marks appeared to have healed during the animal's lifetime, suggesting that dinosaurs could survive serious injuries and continue living in their social groups for extended periods. The emerging picture of dinosaur life was one of remarkable complexity and sophistication. These were not the sluggish, primitive creatures of popular imagination, but active, intelligent animals with rich social lives and complex behaviors. Many possessed brain structures that were remarkably similar to those of modern birds, suggesting levels of cognitive ability that would have seemed impossible just decades earlier. The cognitive capabilities of dinosaurs became a particularly active area of research, as new analytical techniques allowed scientists to study fossilized brain cases in unprecedented detail. CT scanning technology could reveal the internal structure of skulls without damaging the fossils, allowing researchers to create detailed three-dimensional models of dinosaur brains. What they found challenged many assumptions about reptilian intelligence. Many theropod dinosaurs, the group that includes the ancestors of birds, had brain structures that were surprisingly bird-like. They possessed enlarged cerebellums, the brain regions responsible for coordinating complex movements and processing spatial information. They had well-developed optic lobes, suggesting sophisticated visual processing capabilities. Most intriguingly, some showed evidence of enlarged forebrains, the regions associated with complex thinking and problem-solving in modern animals. These neuroanatomical studies suggested that the intelligence of modern birds had not appeared suddenly with the evolution of flight, but had been gradually developing in their dinosaur ancestors over millions of years. The cognitive abilities that allow modern birds to use tools, solve complex problems, and engage in sophisticated social behaviors were apparently present, at least in rudimentary form, in creatures that lived long before the first bird took to the skies. The realization that many dinosaurs may have been quite intelligent had profound implications for understanding their extinction. Rather than being victims of their own evolutionary limitations, dinosaurs appear to have been sophisticated, adaptable creatures that had successfully dominated terrestrial ecosystems for over 160 million years. Their ultimate extinction began to look less like an inevitable consequence of primitive biology and more like the result of catastrophic environmental changes that even intelligent, adaptable creatures could not survive. Yet the story of dinosaur extinction became more nuanced as scientists began to appreciate the selectivity of the end Cretaceous extinction event. While the giant ground-dwelling dinosaurs perished, their smaller, more agile relatives survived to become the ancestors of modern birds. The same intelligence and behavioral flexibility that had made dinosaurs successful for so long may have been key factors in allowing some lineages to survive the greatest catastrophe in Earth's history. This perspective on extinction and survival brought new insights into the resilience of life itself. The end Cretaceous extinction, devastating as it was, had not eliminated dinosaurs entirely, but had simply winnowed their diversity down to the lineages best adapted for the post-catastrophe world. The survivors were not necessarily the strongest or largest, but those with the behavioral flexibility and physiological adaptations necessary to exploit new ecological opportunities. The study of extinction selectivity revealed that size had been a critical factor in determining survival. Smaller dinosaurs, those roughly the size of modern birds, had been much more likely to survive than their giant relatives. This size-selective extinction pattern helped explain why modern birds are generally much smaller than their Mesozoic ancestors. The ecological niches that had supported giant dinosaurs had disappeared with the end Cretaceous catastrophe, leaving only opportunities for smaller, more agile creatures. But size was not the only factor that influenced survival. Diet also played a crucial role, with omnivorous and seed-eating species being more likely to survive than strict carnivores or large herbivores. This dietary selectivity made sense in the context of post-impact environmental conditions. The global darkness that followed the asteroid impact would have devastated plant communities, eliminating the food sources that supported large herbivorous dinosaurs and the carnivores that preyed upon them. Only creatures capable of surviving on seeds, small invertebrates, and other resources that persisted through the environmental collapse would have had any chance of survival. The survivors also shared other characteristics that proved crucial during the extinction crisis. Many were capable of flight or at least gliding, allowing them to escape local environmental disasters and search for resources across wide areas. They tended to have rapid reproductive cycles, allowing populations to recover quickly from catastrophic losses. Most importantly, they possessed the behavioral flexibility to exploit new food sources and habitat types as the post-extinction world reorganized itself. These insights into extinction and survival patterns provided a new framework for understanding major evolutionary transitions. Rather than being driven primarily by competitive advantages or gradual environmental change, many of the most dramatic shifts in the history of life appear to be the result of rare catastrophic events that reset the evolutionary playing field. The rise of mammals, the diversification of flowering plants, and even the origin of complex life itself might all be understood as consequences of such reset events. The catastrophic perspective on evolution also highlighted the role of contingency and chance in shaping the history of life. The particular characteristics that allowed early birds to survive the end Cretaceous extinction had not evolved specifically for survival during global catastrophes. They were adaptations that had originally served other purposes, but happened to be advantageous when environmental conditions changed dramatically and unpredictably. This element of chance in evolutionary history became a recurring theme as scientists studied other major transitions in the fossil record. Time and again, the lineages that survived major extinction events were not necessarily those that seemed best adapted to pre-extinction conditions, but those that possessed characteristics that proved valuable under entirely new environmental circumstances. Evolution, it seemed, was not just about optimization for current conditions, but about maintaining the flexibility to respond to unpredictable future challenges. The recognition of evolution's contingent nature brought a new humility to paleontological interpretation. The success of any particular lineage, including our own species, began to look less like the inevitable result of superior adaptation and more like the product of fortunate timing and favorable circumstances. The dinosaur-to-bird transition, remarkable as it was, might never have occurred if environmental conditions had been slightly different, if the asteroid had missed Earth, or if the surviving lineages had lacked the particular combination of characteristics that allowed them to exploit post-extinction opportunities. Yet this element of contingency did not diminish the wonder of the dinosaur-bird story. If anything, it made the transformation seem even more remarkable, a testament to life's ability to find creative solutions to seemingly impossible challenges. The fact that small feathered dinosaurs could survive one of the most severe environmental catastrophes in Earth's history and give rise to the incredible diversity of modern birds speaks to the fundamental resilience and creativity of evolutionary processes. As we continue to trace this ancient narrative through the fossil record and into the present day, we find ourselves confronting the profound interconnectedness of all life on Earth. The songbird outside your window carries within its cells the molecular memory of creatures that witnessed the fall of the dinosaurs. The eagle soaring overhead navigates using neural circuits that were refined across millions of years of dinosaur evolution. Even the humble chicken A in farmyard represents one of evolution's most remarkable success stories, a living descendant of predatory dinosaurs that learned to conquer the skies. This realization transforms our relationship with the natural world around us. Every bird we encounter becomes a living link to deep time, a reminder that the present moment is built upon foundations laid down across vast spans of geological history. The complex behaviors we observe in modern birds, from elaborate courtship displays to sophisticated tool use, carry echoes of innovations that first appeared in creatures that lived when the continents themselves were arranged differently across the face of the Earth. The story of dinosaur-to-bird evolution also provides profound insights into the nature of scientific understanding itself. The gradual accumulation of evidence, the constant refinement of theories in light of new discoveries, and the occasional revolutionary insights that transform entire fields of study all reflect the dynamic nature of scientific knowledge. What we thought we knew about dinosaurs 50 years ago has been transformed by discoveries that continue to emerge from fossil sites around the world. This ongoing process of discovery reminds us that science is not a static collection of facts, but a living, growing understanding of the natural world. Each new fossil, each new analytical technique, each new insight into the workings of evolutionary processes adds another piece to our understanding of how life has changed and diversified across the vast expanse of geological time. The story of dinosaur-to-bird evolution is still each new discovery potentially being written, with changing our understanding of how this remarkable transformation occurred. As we drift deeper into this contemplation of deep time and evolutionary change, we find ourselves marveling at the elegant complexity of the processes that have shaped life on Earth. The transition from dinosaur to bird required the coordination of changes across multiple biological scale systems, from etal structure to respiratory function too. Yet neural organization, these changes did not occur all at once, but accumulated gradually across millions of years, each small modification building upon previous innovations to create something entirely new. The gradual nature of this transformation highlights one of evolution's most remarkable characteristics, its ability to build complex solutions through the accumulation of small, individually advantageous changes. No single mutation could transform a dinosaur into a bird, but millions of small modifications, tested by natural selection and refined across countless generations, eventually produced creatures capable of powered flight. This process requires neither foresight nor planning, but simply the patient testing of variations against the demands of survival and reproduction. The elegance of this evolutionary process becomes even more apparent when we examine how flight itself emerged from seemingly unrelated adaptations. The hollow bones that made dinosaurs swift runners also happened to reduce their weight, creating the possibility for aerial locomotion. The rapid metabolisms that fueled their active hunting lifestyles provided the energy reserves necessary for the demanding work of flapping flight. Even the keen eyesight that helped them track prey across prehistoric landscapes would later prove essential for navigating the three-dimensional world of the skies. In quiet laboratories around the world, researchers continue to uncover evidence of this remarkable transformation through methods that would seem like magic to earlier generations of scientists. They can now examine individual cells within fossilized bones, revealing growth patterns that speak to how quickly young dinosaurs matured and how their bodies responded to the stresses of an active lifestyle. They can trace the development of air sacs through dinosaur skeletons, watching as evolution gradually hollowed out solid bones to create the lightweight framework necessary for flight. Perhaps most remarkably, they can now study the microscopic structure of fossilized feathers with such precision that they can determine not just their shape and size, but even their original colors and patterns. This work has revealed that many dinosaurs were adorned with brilliant displays that would have rivaled the most spectacular modern birds. Some sported iridescent patches that caught the light like polished metal, while others displayed complex patterns of stripes and spots that may have served for communication or camouflage. The discovery of these ancient colour patterns has opened entirely new avenues for understanding dinosaur behaviour. In the modern world, bright coloration almost always serves social functions, helping animals recognise potential mates, establish territories, or communicate with members of their species. The presence of such elaborate displays in dinosaurs suggests that these creatures had rich social lives, engaging in courtship rituals and status displays that may have been every bit as complex as those we observe in modern birds. This understanding has transformed how scientists interpret fossil assemblages. Bone beds that were once viewed as simple death sites began to reveal evidence of complex social structures. Groups of dinosaurs found together might represent family units that lived and travelled as cohesive groups. Large accumulations of fossils could indicate seasonal gathering places where multiple communities came together for breeding or migration, much as modern birds congregate at specific locations during their annual journeys. The evidence for sophisticated dinosaur societies continues to emerge from unexpected sources. In the windswept badlands of Mongolia, paleontologists have discovered what appear to be dinosaur dance floors, cleared areas where multiple individuals may have gathered for elaborate courtship displays. The idea of massive predators engaging in delicate mating rituals might seem incongruous, but the fossil evidence suggests that such behaviours were a regular part of their social lives. Even more intriguing are the nesting sites that reveal the depth of parental care among these ancient creatures. Rather than simply laying eggs and abandoning them, as many modern reptiles do, numerous dinosaur species appear to have been devoted parents. They constructed elaborate nests, carefully arranged their eggs in precise patterns, and may have even regulated the temperature of their clutches through their own body heat. Some fossil sites preserve the remains of adults that died while apparently brooding their nests, suggesting levels of parental devotion that would not seem out of place among modern birds. These discoveries have profound implications for understanding the cognitive abilities of dinosaurs. The complex behaviours required for nest construction, egg incubation, and chick-rearing demand sophisticated neural processing and behavioural flexibility. The fact that such behaviours were present in dinosaurs millions of years before the evolution of flight suggests that the intelligence we admire in modern birds has much deeper roots than previously suspected. Recent studies of fossilised dinosaur brain cases have provided direct evidence for this cognitive sophistication. Using advanced CT scanning techniques, researchers can now peer inside ancient skulls without damaging the fossils, creating detailed three-dimensional models of dinosaur brains. What they have found challenges many assumptions about reptilian intelligence and reveals striking similarities to the brain structures of modern birds. Many theropod dinosaurs possessed enlarged cerebellums, the brain regions responsible for coordinating complex movements and processing spatial information. They had well-developed optic lobes, indicating sophisticated visual processing capabilities that would have been essential for both hunting and social interaction. Most remarkably, some showed evidence of enlarged forebrains, the regions associated with higher-order thinking and problem-solving in modern animals. These neuroanatomical studies suggest that the remarkable intelligence of modern birds did not appear suddenly with the evolution of flight, but had been developing gradually in their dinosaur ancestors over tens of millions of years. The cognitive abilities that allow contemporary birds to use tools, solve complex puzzles, and engage in sophisticated social behaviours were apparently present in at least rudimentary form in creatures that never left the ground. This realization has transformed our understanding of what it means to be a dinosaur. Rather than the sluggish, primitive creatures of popular imagination, many dinosaurs emerge as active, intelligent animals with complex social lives and sophisticated behaviors. They lived in structured communities, engaged in elaborate courtship rituals, and cared devotedly for their young. In many ways, they were remarkably similar to the birds we observe today, differing primarily in size and the absence of powered flight. The recognition of this continuity between dinosaurs and birds has also shed new light on one of paleontology's greatest mysteries. Why did some dinosaur lineages survive the catastrophic extinction that ended the Mesozoic era, while others perished? The answer appears to lie not in superior strength or size, but in the possession of characteristics that proved advantageous under radically changed environmental conditions. The survivors of the end Cretaceous extinction were not the largest or most powerful dinosaurs, but rather the smallest and most adaptable. They possessed rapid metabolisms that allowed them to maintain activity levels even when food became scarce. They had behavioral flexibility that enabled them to exploit new food sources as traditional resources disappeared. Most importantly, many had already developed the ability to fly, allowing them to escape local disasters and search for suitable habitat across wide areas. The selectivity of this extinction event reveals something profound about the nature of evolutionary success. Adaptations that seem advantageous under stable conditions may become liabilities when environments change rapidly and unpredictably. The massive size that made some dinosaurs dominant in their ecosystems became a disadvantage when food resources dwindled. The specialized diets that allowed efficient exploitation of particular resources became death sentences when those resources vanished. In that allowed early birds to survive the extinction contrast, the characteristics crisis were often features that had originally evolved for entirely different purposes. Feathers that first appeared as insulation became flight surfaces. Hollow bones that reduced weight for faster running enabled aerial locomotion. High metabolisms that supported active lifestyles provided the energy necessary for sustained flight. Evolution had unknowingly prepared these lineages for challenges they had never before faced. This pattern of evolutionary pre-adaptation highlights one of the most remarkable aspects of the natural world: its ability to create solutions to problems that do not yet exist. The features that would prove crucial for surviving a global catastrophe were not specifically designed for that purpose, but emerged through the ordinary processes of adaptation to immediate environmental pressures. Only in hindsight do we recognize how these seemingly unrelated adaptations would combine to create entirely new possibilities for life. The story of dinosaur-to-bird evolution thus becomes more than just an account of anatomical transformation. Fundamental, it reveals principles about how life responds to environmental challenges, how complex innovations emerge from simple beginnings, and how the history of life is shaped by both gradual change and catastrophic events. It shows us that evolution is simultaneously predictable and contingent, following logical patterns while remaining sensitive to the unpredictable accidents of history. As we trace this ancient narrative from its beginnings in the fossil record to its continuation in the living world around us, we find ourselves confronting profound questions about the nature of change itself. How do small modifications accumulate into major transformations? What drives the endless creativity of evolutionary processes? And what does our growing understanding of these mechanisms tell us about the future of life on Earth? The answers to these questions remain elusive, hidden in the complex interplay between genetic possibility and environmental opportunity that drives all evolutionary change. Yet each new discovery brings us closer to understanding the fundamental principles that govern life's remarkable ability to transform and adapt. In the patient work of paleontologists extracting fossils from ancient stone, in the sophisticated analyses that reveal the molecular basis of evolutionary innovation, and in the ongoing observations of how modern species respond to environmental challenges, we glimpse the deeper patterns that connect all living things across the vast expanse of time. The gentle robin that visits your garden carries within its bones the architectural innovations of dinosaurs that lived when the continents were arranged differently across the Earth's surface. The hawk that circles overhead navigates using neural circuits that were refined across millions of years of predatory evolution. Even the common pigeon that walks along city sidewalks represents one of evolution's most remarkable achievements, a living testament to the power of gradual change to produce extraordinary results. This perspective transforms every encounter with birds into an opportunity for wonder and reflection. Each flight pattern we observe, each song we hear, each behavior we witness carries echoes of innovations that first appeared in creatures that witnessed the rise and fall of mountain ranges, the opening and closing of ocean basins, and the slow dance of continents across the face of the planet. The natural world around us becomes a living museum of deep time, where every species tells a story that stretches back hundreds of millions of years. Yet the story of dinosaur-to-bird evolution also reminds us that this ancient narrative is far from finished. The same evolutionary processes that transformed terrestrial predators into masters of the sky continue to operate today, shaping the natural world in response to changing environmental conditions. Climate change, habitat fragmentation, and other human influences are creating new selective pressures that will undoubtedly leave their mark on future generations of birds and other organisms. Modern birds continue to demonstrate the adaptive flexibility that allowed their ancestors to survive one of the greatest catastrophes in Earth's history. They colonize new habitats, develop resistance to diseases, and modify their behaviors in response to human activities. Some species are expanding their ranges as global temperatures rise, while others are shifting their migration patterns to match changing seasonal cycles. A few have even learned to exploit entirely artificial environments, nesting in urban skyscrapers and foraging in suburban gardens. This ongoing adaptation reveals that evolution is not a process confined to the distant past, but a dynamic force that continues to shape life in the present moment. The same mechanisms that allowed feathered dinosaurs to take to the skies are still at work today, testing new variations against the demands of survival and reproduction. Each generation of birds represents another experiment in the ancient art of living, another attempt to find successful solutions to the challenges posed by an ever-changing world. The recognition that evolution continues in the present brings both hope and responsibility. It suggests that life possesses an inherent resilience, an ability to find creative responses to environmental challenges that might seem insurmountable. Yet of current, it also reminds us that the pace of environmental change may be unprecedented in the history of life, creating challenges that even evolution's remarkable creativity may struggle to address. As we contemplate the future of birds and other organisms in a rapidly changing world, the story of dinosaur-to-bird evolution provides both inspiration and caution. It shows us that life can accomplish remarkable transformations given sufficient time and opportunity. It also reveals that major evolutionary transitions often occur during periods of environmental upheaval, when stable ecosystems break down and new possibilities emerge from the chaos. The question that haunts us is whether the current period of rapid environmental change will prove to be another creative moment in the history of life, or whether it will overwhelm the adaptive capacity of many species before they can respond effectively. The answer will depend partly on the pace and severity of environmental changes, but also on the evolutionary potential that exists within current populations of organisms. Birds, with their remarkable mobility, behavioral flexibility, and rapid reproductive cycles, may be among the organisms best positioned to adapt to changing conditions. Their ability to move quickly between different habitats allows them to track resources as they shift across the landscape. Their sophisticated learning abilities enable them to modify their behaviors in response to new challenges. Most importantly, their high metabolic rates and short generation times allow evolutionary changes to occur relatively quickly. Yet even birds face unprecedented challenges in the modern world. Habitat loss eliminates the resources they need for survival and reproduction. Pollution introduces novel toxins that can disrupt their physiological processes, Climate change alters the timing of seasonal events, potentially disrupting the delicate synchronization between bird life cycles and their food sources. The cumulative effects of these changes may test the adaptive limits of even the most flexible species. The story of how dinosaurs became birds thus takes on new relevance as we consider the future of life on Earth. It reminds us that evolution's greatest achievements often emerge from periods of crisis and upheaval. It shows us that characteristics which seem unimportant under stable conditions may prove crucial when environments change rapidly. Most importantly, it demonstrates that life's capacity for creative transformation extends far beyond anything we might imagine possible. As we bring this gentle exploration of deep time toward its conclusion, we find ourselves filled with wonder at the remarkable journey we have traced together. From the first fossilized feather discovered in a German quarry to the sophisticated molecular analyses that reveal the genetic basis of evolutionary change, from the magnificent diversity of Mesozoic ecosystems to the ongoing adaptations of modern birds, we have followed a thread that connects the deepest past to the living present. The story of dinosaur-to-bird evolution is ultimately a story about the power of time itself, about how small changes accumulating across vast spans of geological history can produce transformations that seem almost miraculous in their scope and beauty. It reveals that the categories we use to organize the natural world are often more fluid than we imagine, that the boundaries between one type of creature and another may be far less rigid than they appear. Most importantly, it shows us that we live in a world where dinosaurs never truly disappeared, but simply transformed into something new and equally remarkable. Every bird that graces our skies carries within its very essence the genetic memory of creatures that dominated the Earth for over 160 million years. In their songs, their flights, their behaviors, and their remarkable adaptations, we glimpse echoes of an ancient world that continues to shape the present in ways we are only beginning to understand. The gentle unfolding of this ancient mystery brings us to perhaps the most contentious battlefield in all of paleontology, a place where scientific reputations have been built and shattered, where passionate debates have raged for decades in conference halls and academic journals. It is here, in the careful examination of wing bones and flight mechanics, that we encounter some of the most heated disagreements about how creatures bound to the Earth could have possibly learned to dance with the wind. The question seems deceptively simple at first glance. How did flight begin? Yet this innocent inquiry has sparked debate so intense that colleagues speaking to one have stopped another. Careers have been devoted to defending particular theories, and entire research programs have been built around competing visions of how the impossible became inevitable. The controversy centers not on whether dinosaurs evolved into birds, for that connection has become increasingly clear, but on the precise mechanisms that allowed these terrestrial creatures to conquer the skies. Two primary theories have emerged from decades of research and argument, each with passionate advocates and compelling evidence. The first suggests that flight began from the ground up, with small, swift dinosaurs using their developing wings to leap higher and higher until they achieved true powered flight. Picture these ancient creatures as runners, using their proto-wings like the arms of a sprinter, pumping them for additional lift as they pursued prey or fled from predators across the prehistoric landscape. The competing theory proposes that flight evolved from the trees down, with arboreal dinosaurs using their feathered limbs to glide from branch to branch, before gradually developing the ability to sustain themselves in the air through powered flight. In this vision, early birds were climbers first and flyers second, creatures that lived in the forest canopy and used gravity as their ally in mastering aerial locomotion. Both scenarios have their champions, and both are supported by fossils that seem to tell compelling stories. The ground-up advocates point to creatures like Compsognathus, swift little predators with long legs built for running, and arms that could have provided additional lift during high-speed pursuits. They argue that the cursorial lifestyle of many small theropods would have favored any adaptation that increased jumping ability or provided additional thrust during rapid acceleration. The tree's down proponents counter with fossils like Microraptor, the four-winged dinosaur discovered in China that clearly possessed adaptations for life in the trees. Its wing feathers were asymmetrical, much like those of modern flying birds, yet its body proportions and claw structure suggested it was primarily a glider rather than a powered flyer. Computer models of Microraptor's aerodynamics indicate it could have glided effectively from tree to tree, using its four wings to control its descent and landing. The debate intensifies when researchers examine the earliest known birds themselves. Archaeopteryx, that famous transitional fossil, possesses features that could support either theory. Its wing structure suggests it was capable of at least limited powered flight, yet its claws and overall body proportions indicate it was also well adapted for climbing. Did it run along the ground and leap into the air, or did it climb into trees and launch itself into gliding flight? Recent biomechanical studies have added new dimensions to this ancient argument. Engineers studying the aerodynamics of early flight have discovered that the transition from gliding to powered flight is far more complex than previously imagined. The wing shapes and muscle attachments necessary for sustained flapping flight are quite different from those needed for efficient gliding, suggesting that the evolutionary path from one to the other would have required significant anatomical reorganization. These engineering insights have led some researchers to propose hybrid scenarios that combine elements of both ground-up and trees-down theories. Perhaps different lineages explored different pathways to flight, with some beginning as ground-dwelling lepers and others as arboreal gliders. The eventual success of powered flight might have resulted from the convergence of these separate evolutionary experiments, with different innovations being combined and refined until true aerial mastery was achieved. The fossil record itself remains tantalizingly incomplete when it comes to resolving these debates. The transition from non-flying dinosaurs to fully capable birds appears to have occurred relatively quickly in geological terms, leaving few intermediate forms preserved in stone. Each new discovery is scrutinized intensely for clues about flight origins, yet the evidence often proves ambiguous, capable of supporting multiple interpretations. This ambiguity has led to some of the most creative scientific detective work in paleontology. Researchers have turned to studying the flight development of modern birds, watching how chicks learn to fly in hopes of understanding how flight might have evolved. They have built models that sophisticated computer can test the aerodynamic capabilities of extinct creatures, subjecting fossilized wing bones to virtual wind tunnels to determine whether ancient animals could have achieved powered flight. Some of the most intriguing insights have come from studies of modern birds that seem to recapitulate aspects of ancient flight evolution. Young hoatzins, unusual birds that live in South American wetlands, are born with claws on their wings that they use for climbing through vegetation before they develop full flight capabilities. This ontogenetic pattern, where individuals pass through developmental stages that echo evolutionary history, suggests that climbing and flying abilities may have been intimately connected in early bird evolution. The study of flight development has also revealed just how demanding powered flight truly is from a physiological perspective. Modern birds must maintain extremely high metabolic rates to fuel their flight muscles, requiring sophisticated cardiovascular and respiratory systems to deliver the necessary oxygen and nutrients. The evolution of flight therefore involved not just changes in wing structure, but fundamental reorganization of internal physiology. These physiological demands help explain why the evolution of flight was such a rare event in the history of life. Despite the obvious advantages of aerial locomotion, powered flight has evolved independently only 4 times in vertebrate history: in pterosaurs, birds, bats, and insects. Each group solved the basic engineering challenges of flight in different ways, yet all required similar levels of anatomical and physiological specialization. The rarity of flight evolution has led researchers to examine more closely the specific conditions that might have favored its development. What environmental pressures could have been strong enough to drive the complex anatomical changes necessary for aerial locomotion? The late Jurassic and early Cretaceous periods, when most flight evolution occurred, were times of significant environmental change, with shifting climates and evolving ecosystems creating new challenges and opportunities. Some scientists have proposed that the evolution of flight was driven by predator-prey dynamics, with small dinosaurs developing aerial capabilities to escape from larger ground-dwelling predators. Others suggest that flight evolved as a means of accessing new food sources, allowing creatures to reach insects and other prey that were unavailable to terrestrial hunters. Still others argue that flight may have originally evolved for display purposes, with elaborate aerial performances serving to attract mates or establish dominance. The sexual selection hypothesis has gained considerable attention in recent years, particularly as evidence has accumulated for the importance of display behaviors in dinosaur evolution. The brilliant colors and elaborate ornamentations found in many feathered dinosaurs suggest that visual displays were already important aspects of their behavior. The transition from ground-based displays to aerial performances might have provided the selective pressure necessary to drive the evolution of powered flight. Yet even as researchers debate the ultimate causes of flight evolution, they continue to uncover evidence that complicates simple explanations. Recent discoveries have revealed that feathers evolved long before flight, initially serving functions related to insulation and display rather than aerial locomotion. This temporal separation between feather evolution and flight development suggests that the story of avian origins is far more complex than early theories proposed. The discovery of feathered dinosaurs that were clearly incapable of flight has forced scientists to reconsider the relationship between feathers and aerial locomotion. If feathers did not originally evolve for flight, then their eventual co-optation for this purpose represents a classic example of evolutionary exaptation, where structures that evolved for one function are later modified to serve entirely different purposes. This pattern of evolutionary repurposing appears to be a recurring theme in the dinosaur-to-bird transition. Hollow bones that originally evolved to reduce weight for faster running later proved advantageous for flight. Rapid metabolisms that supported active terrestrial lifestyles provided the energy necessary for sustained wing beating. Even the enhanced visual systems that helped dinosaurs track prey and navigate complex environments would later prove essential for the three-dimensional challenges of aerial life. The recognition that flight evolution involved the creative combination of pre-existing adaptations has led to new appreciation for the role of developmental constraints in shaping evolutionary outcomes. The particular combination of features present in small theropod dinosaurs may have uniquely positioned them to evolve powered flight, while other lineages lacking these prerequisites were unable to make the transition despite similar environmental pressures. This constraint-based perspective on evolution helps explain why flight is so rare, while also illuminating why it was possible at all. The evolution of complex innovations like powered flight requires not just favorable environmental conditions, but also the presence of appropriate anatomical and developmental foundations. Only lineages that possess the right combination of pre-existing features can successfully navigate the demanding transition from terrestrial to aerial life. The study of these evolutionary constraints has become increasingly sophisticated as researchers develop new methods for analyzing the relationship between form and function in extinct organisms. Advanced computer modeling techniques can now predict the aerodynamic performance of hypothetical intermediate forms, allowing scientists to test whether proposed evolutionary pathways are physically realistic. These biomechanical analyses have revealed that the transition to powered flight involved navigating a complex landscape of engineering trade-offs. Wing shapes that are optimal for gliding are quite different from those needed for flapping flight. Body proportions that maximize climbing ability may compromise running performance. Each step along the evolutionary pathway from terrestrial dinosaur to flying bird required balancing competing functional demands while maintaining the ability to survive and reproduce. The complexity of these trade-offs helps explain why the fossil record contains so many apparent dead ends, lineages that developed some but not all of the features necessary for successful flight. Creatures like Epidexipteryx possessed elaborate feathered displays but lacked the wing proportions necessary for aerial locomotion. Others, like Rhonavis, had well-developed flight feathers but retained the heavy bones and body proportions of terrestrial dinosaurs. These evolutionary experiments that fell short of achieving true flight nonetheless provide valuable insights into the step-by-step process of major evolutionary transitions. They reveal that the path from dinosaur to bird was not a smooth progression, but rather a series of tentative explorations, with different lineages testing various combinations of features, until one finally achieved the breakthrough that enabled sustained powered flight. The recognition that evolution often proceeds through such trial and error processes has transformed how scientists think about major evolutionary innovations. Rather than viewing complex adaptations as the inevitable products of natural selection, researchers now appreciate them as the fortunate outcomes of countless small experiments, most of which ultimately failed, but a few of which stumbled upon combinations that worked brilliantly. This perspective brings a new sense of wonder to the dinosaur-to-bird transition. The fact that powered flight evolved at all begins to seem almost miraculous, the result of an extraordinarily unlikely convergence of anatomical possibilities, environmental pressures, and evolutionary timing. Yet it happened, and the skies of our world are filled with the descendants of those first tentative flyers who somehow managed to solve one of evolution's most demanding challenges. As we drift deeper into this contemplation of ancient flight, we find ourselves marveling at the delicate balance of factors that made the impossible possible. Each discovery adds another layer to our understanding, while simultaneously revealing how much remains unknown about this remarkable transformation. The debates continue, the fossils keep emerging from ancient stone, and the mystery of how dinosaurs learned to fly remains one of the most captivating puzzles in all of natural history. In quiet moments, when we watch a bird effortlessly navigate the three-dimensional world of air currents and thermal columns, we are witnessing the culmination of one of evolution's greatest achievements. Those graceful wing beats carry within them the memory of countless failed attempts, of lineages that came close but fell short, of the patient accumulation of small innovations that eventually achieved something that seemed impossible. The flight of every bird is a testament to the power of evolutionary processes to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges through the simple mechanism of variation, selection, and time. The story of how creatures of the earth learned to dance with the sky continues to unfold in laboratories and fossil sites around the world, each new piece of evidence adding to our understanding while opening new questions about the nature of evolutionary innovation itself. In this ancient tale of transformation, we find not just the origins of modern birds, but profound insights into how life itself responds to challenges by finding creative solutions that surpass even our wildest imagination. The gentle controversy continues to ripple through scientific corridors even today, as new technologies reveal secrets that earlier generations of paleontologists could never have imagined. In laboratories scattered across continents, researchers peer into fossilized bones with instruments so precise they can detect individual molecules preserved against impossible odds. What they find often challenges the very foundations of theories that seemed unshakable just decades ago. Consider the recent discovery of medullary bone tissue in the fossilized remains of several dinosaur species. This specialized bone tissue, found today only in female birds during their egg-laying periods, provides direct evidence that some dinosaurs shared not just anatomical features with modern birds, but also reproductive physiology. The implications stretch far beyond simple classification, suggesting that the hormonal systems governing reproduction in modern birds had already evolved in their terrestrial ancestors millions of years before the first creature took flight. These molecular glimpses into dinosaur biology have opened entirely new chapters in the ongoing debate about bird origins. Scientists can now examine the chemical signatures left behind by ancient proteins, comparing them across species and through time to trace evolutionary relationships with unprecedented precision. The results consistently support the dinosaurian origin of birds, yet they also reveal a complexity in this relationship that earlier theories had never anticipated. Perhaps most intriguingly, recent studies have begun to examine the fossilized remains of dinosaur eggs and embryos with techniques borrowed from developmental biology. By studying how ancient creatures grew and developed, researchers can observe evolution in action as developmental programs unfold in fossilized form. What they discover often mirrors the embryonic development of modern birds, with temporary structures appearing and disappearing in patterns from dinosaurs that echo the evolutionary journey to bird. The embryological evidence has proven particularly compelling because it reveals not just what ancient creatures looked like, but how they grew into their adult forms. Dinosaur embryos show developmental patterns remarkably similar to those of modern birds, with the same basic body plan being modified and refined through subtle changes in timing and gene expression. These developmental similarities provide some of the strongest evidence yet for the evolutionary continuity between dinosaurs and birds. Yet even as the evidence for dinosaurian bird origins has become overwhelming, new discoveries continue to complicate our understanding of exactly how this transformation occurred. Recent fossil finds from South America have revealed bird-like dinosaurs that lived well into the Cretaceous period, long after the first true birds had evolved. These creatures possessed feathers, hollow bones, and even some flight adaptations, yet they represent evolutionary lineages that were clearly separate from the ancestors of parallel experiments modern birds. These in bird-like evolution suggest that the transition from dinosaur to bird was not a single linear progression, but rather a complex radiation of different lineages exploring similar solutions to environmental challenges. Some of these experiments ultimately succeeded in giving rise to modern birds, while others flourished for millions of years before eventually going extinct. The diversity of these ancient forms reveals just how many different ways evolution found to modify the basic dinosaur body plan. The recognition of this evolutionary complexity has led scientists to reconsider fundamental questions about how major transitions occur in the history of life. Rather than viewing the dinosaur to bird transformation as a simple progression from primitive to advanced forms, researchers now see it as a dynamic period of evolutionary experimentation in which multiple lineages simultaneously explored the possibilities inherent in the dinosaurian body plan. This new understanding has profound implications for how we interpret the fossil record and the patterns of evolutionary change it reveals. The apparent gaps and inconsistencies that once troubled paleontologists begin to make sense when viewed as the natural result of complex branching evolutionary processes, rather than simple linear progressions. Evolution, it seems, is far more creative and opportunistic than early theories suggested. The creativity of evolutionary processes becomes even more apparent when we examine the remarkable diversity of feeding strategies that evolved among early birds and their dinosaurian relatives. Some developed the crushing beaks necessary for cracking tough seeds and nuts. Others evolved the delicate, pointed bills needed for extracting nectar from flowers. Still others developed the hooked beaks and powerful talons of aerial predators. Each of these feeding specializations required coordinated changes across multiple body systems. The evolution of seed-eating capabilities, for instance, demanded not just changes in beak structure, but also modifications to jaw muscles, digestive systems, and even brain regions responsible for processing complex foraging behaviors. These integrated changes could not have occurred overnight, but required millions of years of gradual refinement and testing. And so we reach the end of our gentle journey through deep time, where the boundary between dinosaur and bird dissolves like morning mist in sunlight. The evidence whispers to us from fossilized bones and preserved feathers, from molecular signatures and embryonic echoes, all telling the same remarkable story. Birds did not simply evolve from dinosaurs. They are dinosaurs, living reminders that the age of giants never truly ended, but simply transformed into something new and equally wondrous. The next time you hear a robin's song drifting through your window, remember that you are listening to the voice of deep time itself, to melodies refined across millions of years of evolution. In every flutter of wings, in every graceful landing, in every nest carefully woven from twigs and dreams, we glimpse the creative power of life to reinvent itself in ways that surpass our wildest imagination. Until we meet again in another chapter of wonder, may your dreams be filled with the rustle of ancient feathers and the whispered secrets of stones. Sweet dreams, dear friends.